Good morning on this Tuesday. Gosh, I'm pushing the days ahead. It is March the 9th. Let it be known this morning we got a great conversation planned with a spectacular young African American woman who is going to school for marine biology. Great story coming right up. But first, the headlines. And before we even get into the headlines, let's bring on our president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. Dr. Chavis, good morning.
Good morning, Stacy, and good morning, America, from Black America Press, the National Newspaper Publishers Association. This is our 194th year. And next week, we're going to be celebrating 2021 Black Press Week, put on by the National Newspaper Publishers Association Fund. We have a great, please go to our website and register for Black Press Week. It's going to be a great lift up of the importance of the Black press in 2021. And for all these 194 years, we have not only published the news, but we've remained an advocate for freedom, justice, and equality. And there's a lot going on today, Stacey, with the headlines.
Absolutely. And that website to register, by the way, Dr. Chavis, is virtualnnpa2021.com. You can see it on the scroll below. Please register. It's free. Black Press Week, the biggest week of the year. Jury selection was delayed yesterday in the murder case against fired police officer Derek Chauvin, the fired officer charged with killing George Floyd on a Minneapolis street corner nearly 10 months ago. Hennepin County District Judge Peter Cahill said he wants to hear from the State Court of Appeals about the prosecution's desire to revive a third-degree murder charge to the counts of second-degree murder and manslaughter in George Floyd's death last May, which was captured, as we know, on a bystander's cell phone and broadcast around the world. And keep in mind that the officer agreed to plead guilty to third-degree murder charges last year and agreed to do at least 10 years in prison. However, the former district attorney, Attorney General, I should say, William Barr, rejected the plea deal, and he has left it in the hands of this court to either dismiss those third-degree charges or allow prosecutors to bring those charges, add those charges to Chauvin's case. Dr. Chavis, they're going to do jury selection this morning. It was moved from yesterday to this morning, but the controversy continues as to whether or not they can reinstate this third-degree murder charge against the officer.
Well, I have confidence in the Attorney General of Minnesota, the Honorable Keith Ellison, a former member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now he's the Attorney General. He's overall in charge of this prosecution. And I think that if we're ever going to get justice for George Floyd, we needed someone like Keith Ellison to be the chief law enforcement officer in Minnesota. So we'll look out to see. And of course, we give a shout out to the Insight News and to the Minnesota Spokesman News, our two African-American owned newspapers in Minneapolis who are covering the trial on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll have wall-to-wall coverage, and you can read about it both at the Spokesman Recorder and Insight News, and of course, at www.blackpressusa.com. The criminal charges against Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who fired at cops who burst into their Kentucky apartment last year and shot Breonna Taylor dead, have been permanently dismissed with prejudice. Kenneth Walker, who was charged with assault and attempted murder of a police officer after the March 13th police raid, can now never be recharged in that case. It's a big victory, a much deserved victory for Kenneth Walker and justice, because it was no reason. He had a license to own that gun, Dr. Chavis. He also had a right and a license to defend himself. And as we know, those officers never identified themselves.
That's correct. And now we must continue our demand for justice for Breonna Taylor. You know, this is National Women's Month, and yesterday was International Women's Day. And the fact that there's still no justice for Breonna Taylor, who was killed by that police raid. First of all, it was an unjustified police raid. They claimed they had the wrong apartment. The fact of the matter is, a Black woman was murdered in her own home by the police. in Kentucky, and nothing has been done about it. There's been some settlements, there's been some arguments, but as far as the public, if you talk to any African American from Kentucky, from Louisville, they'll tell you that justice still has not been done.
Yeah. And in other news, the U.S. House of Representatives is poised today to formally pass President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan. The bill passed the Senate along party lines over the weekend, and it should be on the president's desk for signature by tomorrow morning. The bill extends a $300 per week boost to unemployment benefits through September 6th. It also, with those unemployment benefits, the first $10,200 of it is tax-free. It also sends direct payments of up to $1,400 to most Americans, $2,800 for couples, and up to $5,600 for families of four. The bill also includes an expansion of the child tax credit. And there's the important thing not to overlook about the American Rescue Plan. 22 years ago, Prime Minister Tony Blair in Great Britain announced an ambitious plan to fight child poverty there in Britain. At the time, more than 25% of British children lived in poverty. But at the heart of the campaign was government payments to families with children. The rationale was similar to that of a benefit program for older adults called Social Security. Society has an interest in supporting people who cannot work, according to Tony Blair. And in the case of children, poverty can cause damage that lasts for decades. The campaign by Tony Blair and the Labour Party radically changed the situation. 8 years after the announcement, the child poverty rate fell in half in Great Britain. So President Biden's plan contains a child benefit plan that resembles Tony Blair's plan. Most families will receive $3,600 a year that will be paid monthly for each child age 5 or younger, and $3,000 a year per older child up to the age of 18. Other provisions in the bill will further lift income for poor families. Because of the focus on child poverty, many experts, and also, I might add, Barack Obama has said this as well, they've called this American Rescue Plan the most transformational piece of legislation in decades. So it's a game changer, Dr. Chavis.
It's definitely a game changer, and I want everyone to remember who voted for this and who voted against it. You know, it's a sad commentary in the nation's capital that not one Republican voted for the American Rescue Plan. So when people get ready to go to the polls in 2022 or get ready to go to the polls in 2024, I hope that they not get amnesia. They need to remember who voted to not only rescue Americans, but to uplift and get people out of poverty.
Yeah, and as we speak, in Iowa and other places, the Republican legislators there are still instituting voter restriction and anti-voter laws to make sure that people can't get to the polls. For instance, today in Iowa, Dr. Chavis, it was announced, last night, that they are limiting access to the polls even on election day. They're cutting the time in which people can vote. Another form of voter suppression.
Absolutely. But now all these tactics are not going to work. I'm sure that the new Attorney General, as well as the Civil Rights Division of the United States Justice Department, led by African-American women of color and other women of color, I think that this is going to change. It's going to be challenged. It's going to be up to the federal government to step in. That's why we have to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act, because once the Voting Rights Act is reauthorized, which will be called the John Lewis Reauthorization of Voting Rights Act, what these state legislatures are now doing will be found to be against the law, against federal law. It's already unconstitutional, but it has to be challenged. And that's why we have a United States Justice Department, to make sure that these state legislatures don't wind up violating the law as they institute these new voter suppression laws.
Yeah. And our next topic, Dr. Chavis, moving along, question: how many marine biologists do you know? How many African-American marine biologists do you know? And I'll take it one better. How many African-American women marine biologists do you know? Well, biology lab assistant for the University of Oregon and a special event planner at the University of Oregon Veterans Center who served as campus outreach manager and is headed down under to Australia for marine biology. We welcome Miss Kennedy Brooks. How you
Hi.
Good morning, Kennedy. How are you?
Morning. I'm good. How are you all?
Very good. First, we want to say congratulations to you.
Thank you.
You know, you received your degree on International Women's Day from the University of Oregon.
Yes, I'm so excited to be. It's my last term. I've worked so hard the past 4 years. It's a really exciting time. Absolutely.
Well, we're excited to hear about a lot of things, but foremost, marine biology. You have selected that as you move forward to a university in Australia. Tell us about that and why marine biology.
Yeah, so I have just always been really into the sciences. I did for a while. I started out in like performing arts and through dance and theater, and I really did think that was going to be a path that I went, but I ended up like moving like across the country, and it kind of just was like changed, like, oh, maybe this isn't what I want to do. And I ended up really delving into more things in STEM, and I actually saw a thing about a summer camp at Texas A&M Galveston, and it had to do with marine biology and marine mammals. And it just sounded really interesting. And I was like, why not? Let's go for it. And after that camp, it completely changed my perspective. I was like, this is really cool. This is like really cool research. I want to work in the ocean with animals in the ocean, with studying that and continuing in STEM in general, because I am a marine biology major, but I'm also a biology and chem major in it as well. So just delving into all the areas of science and specifically focusing on marine biology, especially right now with the state of our world and the climate. Like, it's really important to look at the oceans and look at how climate change is affecting the oceans and how that will look going further in the future for us and our world.
Yeah, and you know, as Dr. Chavis mentioned, you just graduated. Congratulations. You talk to us a little bit about that too. Graduating in the time of COVID, what was it like? How did you feel that things had to be either through Zoom or social distancing? How was your graduation?
Yes, so we have not had our actual graduation yet, but it will be virtual, and it is unfortunate. It's something we've worked really hard for. College is a really big deal. It's, your first step out kind of on your own, and it's really a lot of work. And so I feel very accomplished to be here, but it would be nice to have some type of actual, celebration of it. But I know that, it's still going to happen. We're still going to take these like further steps, and getting into grad school and moving on to that was like a huge step as well. And graduating, it's definitely the last few terms that I've had in college and COVID have been very different, more sad being home away from, all of my friends and everyone who I've been with these past few years. But I think we've definitely tried to make the most of it. I've really thrown myself into my studies and like what I want to eventually research and, preparing more for the future.
Wow. It sounds really amazing. But going back again, the challenges, Kennedy, can you explain some of the challenges that you have had to overcome and challenges that you may have noticed that your peers have had to overcome during COVID?
Yeah, I definitely know that most people, since we've always done class in person, most of us have never had this like online format, and it's really hard to keep motivated right now when you're constantly like at home. You're not interacting with your peers on the same level. You're not having all these like incentives and exciting things to keep going through. So I know that like motivation has been an incredibly hard thing for myself and my peers and everything, and like finding that reason to like, oh, let's keep going through this, like especially not having that in-person graduation to like finish it off. It's like, we got to keep like trying to get through the little stresses and the everything with COVID. And you're constantly also, you're worried not only about like how you're doing in school and everything, but constant like worry about like, your health and the people around you's health. So you're battling like both different sides of it. And it definitely has caused a lot of people like more anxiety and like different things like that. And I definitely think that that's been a very difficult thing to go through, having COVID in such a transitional period of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of our viewers, James Wright, who actually writes for the Washington Informer, he says we need more Kennedy Brooks. We need more Black women in STEM, and that certainly
yes,
is true, Kennedy. Yeah, so, yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Is part of your goal to kind of encourage other young people, young women of color, towards them?
Yeah, I absolutely. If anything that I am doing can encourage another young woman to continue in this path, I absolutely, because I do find a lot of joy in studying the sciences and like being in a class perspective where there aren't a lot of people who look like me. But when I'm doing well in the class and I'm working hard, it's kind of like a motivation for me as well to keep going and be like, wow, this is something I'm passionate about, something I'm good at. And yeah, it's not an overly representative field, but we need more people to, be in all these different fields that we aren't represented in. So I definitely think it's a motivation for me. And if I can be a motivation for other young women, that's amazing.
Yeah, that is awesome. And as we mentioned at the top, Dr. Chavis, she is going to Australia. You got to tell us more about why you chose Australia, and what are you anticipating as you prepare to go, as they say, down under, and in many ways now, because you're going to be in that water, in that ocean. Tell us about Australia and why Australia.
Yeah, so ever since I kind of decided on marine biology and I was doing research on schools, I was very enticed by James Cook University. It's one of the top marine biology schools in the world. Their access and proximity to the Great Barrier Reef is amazing. It's literally walking distance from the school, which it's always been a dream of mine. One of my top 5 places that I've wanted to visit in the world are the Great Barrier Reef. But what's better than just visiting is being able to study and actually interact with the environment. And I always thought that, going abroad and living abroad, especially, on your own, could be a very valuable experience to learn more about yourself and how you function as a person and really grow as a person. So it was all those factors combined that kind of led me to be like, okay, you didn't really do any studying abroad during your undergrad, so why not? This is the time in your life to go and do this for grad school. And their program is amazing, and I will be able to do a lot of good research with sustainability and climate change there because of all the effects that climate change and everything has on coral reefs. So it's a lot of good factors. I am very excited, but my mom just keeps sending me videos of all the large animals they have there, and that is a little stressful, but I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Chavis, I'm going to send it over to you.
Well, thank you. And Kennedy, we listened very carefully to your responses to Stacey's questions. And you talked about the joy and passion that you have experienced in science, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. The United States Department of Labor says that we need more African Americans, more people of color in STEM fields. There's so many job opportunities, career opportunities. And also there are myths out there, Kennedy. Some people think that science or STEM is too hard for people of color, but you've shown by your own example that you can not only get into this field, but you can strive for excellence. Tell us about your grade point average, and because you just can't get into the University of Australia, that world-class graduate program, unless you're a great student. Talk to us about your academic achievements, as well as opening the door for other women of color to follow your lead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have always, I grew up in a family of teachers, so academics have always been at the forefront of everything. I think definitely for a while I was very hard on myself going through school. It wasn't even my parents, but if I came home with a B, I would cry myself. I've always been extremely hard on myself to keep progressing and doing my best in school as I can. And I definitely, I have the academics to show for it now, which is really awesome. And I'm able to have the mobility to get into this grad school and to get into my undergrad and everything without, having to super worry about it, because I've always, put my academics first and made sure that I had a great relationship with my professors and with my other peers to be able to collaborate and work with them and get extra help when needed. And I think for anyone else trying to get into STEM, like, it's not too hard for you. That is absolutely not the case in any way, shape, or form. Like, if that is what you want to do and you find your passion in it and you're willing to put in the time and effort, because it does take a lot of time and effort sometimes. Like, my sophomore year of college was probably my hardest year, taking organic chemistry and some of my hardest bio classes at the same time. But like, once you get through it, it's very hard in the moment, but you get through it and you feel so much more accomplished, and then you can move on to that next step. And so just take it step by step. And I absolutely think that anyone who wants to get into STEM, just start with like taking maybe some upper level classes, or if it's not necessarily your subject, find someone who is good at it to help you out. And honestly, working with other people and individuals, it's like a really good way to like get yourself into it. Going to different, I don't know, like clubs or camps or different things like that are something new and interesting, like different ways to get into it are definitely, like, if that's not your passion yet, you can find your different niche, because there's a lot of layers to STEM as well. There's so many different areas that you can go into through STEM.
Well, great. Well, we're going to be following your career, and I'm sure there are a lot of young sisters watching today's program who are contemplating going into STEM fields. Again, you set an excellent example, and this is a great way to celebrate Women's History Month, is to lift up scholars like yourself, Kennedy, and to hopefully encourage and motivate others to consider not only marine biology, but all the various fields that STEM offers today.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and Kennedy, talk about the dedication, because obviously you had to really invest in yourself and really be dedicated to this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think it is absolutely a dedication and a commitment. There are times where you have to, especially before, like, you gotta weigh, like, do you want to have this social life to the extent that you want, or like your career? And I wouldn't say you always have to pick between that, because I don't think I ever always had to pick, because I think the best way to go about life is to have a balance, because if you throw yourself only into one thing, then you end up getting lost in it. But I think having that balance, and then sometimes making that decision, like, okay, I need to focus for this period of time and I need to get what I need to get done. And I can't hang out with people this once, but I am going to sit down and I'm going to apply to these schools, apply to these programs. I am going to study for a week straight for this huge final, or really delve into this research for this project. Like, it is a very big time commitment, but when you're going through it and you're really invested in it, it's not necessarily like crazy work or hard all the time. It becomes interesting and it becomes something that you want to do once you get that dedicated and get that passion.
Yeah. And so the work, you look at each thing as a challenge, it sounds like to me. And so that approach, Kennedy, talk about that approach of viewing every step as a challenge, how effective that can be for others, because it sounds like obviously it was very effective for you.
Yeah, for myself, I like to feel like I'm accomplishing something. You know, it helps with my motivation. Like, I have this big project, I want to tackle it, I want to do it to the best of my abilities, and I want to tackle this. So I guess that does look at it as being like each step along the process is a challenge, but it's not necessarily a challenge in a way that it's like extremely grueling, hard, anything like that. But it's just something like, that's the next step that I need to overcome. And the way that I have always done things, I just love to be able to, cross it off my checklist. Like, I have my planners, my checklists. I love to be like, oh, I accomplished something, and mark it off. And if other people have that same perspective, I think it's a really good way to do things, because you're constantly getting that like satisfaction of you're moving forward and you're progressing and you're completing these things that, maybe you didn't think you could do, or maybe they were really difficult to do, or maybe they were easy, but you still did it, and it's some step forward.
Absolutely. Dr. Chavis, our women of color are no longer hidden figures when it comes to STEM.
Absolutely. Before we end, I would like to ask Kennedy, what is your message to women, particularly to women of color, during Women's History Month 2021?
Yeah, I would ultimately say just believe in yourself, having the confidence to be able to say, this is what I want to do and that's what I'm passionate about and I'm going to do it. And it doesn't really matter what anyone else around is thinking or if they're doubting you or anything like that, because if you know that that's what you have in you, then you're going to get it done and you're going to accomplish it. Because everyone can be very driven when they want to be. And if you find your niche, then keep up with it and keep going, because it's rewarding to accomplish something that you really are into and want to do.
Yeah. And
Very good.
We know that when our women are taking trips, the suitcases, they pile up. What are you taking to Australia with you, Kennedy? And how many suitcases?
Unfortunately, I am an awful packer, so I am a little bit nervous about having to cut down. I'm hoping no more than like 2-3 suitcases, and then when I get there, I'll try and figure everything out. Definitely will be trying to take at least some of my family members with me for at least a week that can help me out, and everything else will be taking my degree.
Well, there you go. That's the most important thing,
Yeah,
right?
most important.
Well, final thoughts, Dr. Chavez. Thank you so much, Kennedy Brooks.
Well, thank you again, Kennedy. And I'm sure that this particular episode of Let It Be Known is going to be played over and over again on social media and other media channels, including blackpressusa.com. You are a living tribute to what it means to strive for excellence as a woman, as an African American woman, and your perspective. I'm sure we're going to hear much more now in the marine biology space from you as a leader in that field of science. And we wish you all the best. And the Black Press, we need to, Stacey, follow more of what will be going on in Australia, particularly with the climate change, with oceanography. We now have an expert that we can call on these global issues. We're glad the United States joined back the Paris Climate Treaty, and now we're looking for the Biden-Harris administration to take climate change much more seriously. And of course, marine biology is going to play a role in the public policy going forward. So stay on the case, Kennedy. We know you will. You've been extremely successful academically, and we look forward to hearing great news and great prospects from your future career.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we do each day, we lift up an African American woman during Women's History Month. And today, it's our Executive Administrator, Claudette Perry, the Executive Administrator for the National Newspaper Publishers Association, and a multi-talented problem solver. Ms. Perry has worked extensively to advance not just Black America, but Africans throughout the diaspora. She served as an international representative for the African Union Diaspora African Board and has worked extensively on Capitol Hill, having testified before the United Nations. And she also has worked with several organizations in the nation's capital, as well as regional, national, and international corporations and institutions, including the White House, the Greater Washington Urban League, and many others. A University of Maryland graduate, Ms. Perry also ran HWP Company for nearly 2 decades, where she developed, coordinated, and produced high-end social, political, and cultural events nationally and overseas. She is proudest of the work she has done that focus on improving the life and the quality of life for people of African descent. Let it be known, when you don't talk down to your audience, then they can grow with you. We will see you tomorrow.